finishing up the month of fierce grace. How did it roll through your life? Today's talk is so what? Do it anyway. So what? Do it anyway. And so it got me thinking about the past, and I remember the first time that I experienced a fear of heights. And it terrified me, and it surprised me because I didn't know I was afraid of heights. It almost like it snuck up on me. Until that day, I really didn't believe I was. I don't remember actually even experiencing a fear of heights until that day when it just terrified me. And maybe I was afraid of heights for a long time, or maybe, little by little things kind of made me uncomfortable along the way. I don't really remember. All I remember was specifically, I remember that one day, that one tower, and I remember being just terrified, like could not breathe terrified. And I remember standing up there in that tower thinking to myself, oh, this is not good. This is really, really not good. And after that day, I just sort of arranged my life so I didn't have to confront that anymore. I just sort of made choices. I did the best I could to avoid finding myself in high places. And then I thought about it after a while, and I was like, oh, look, I collected a fear. I claimed my new phobia. It became a descriptor of me, I have acrophobia, fear of heights, right? Do you know that? It's fear of heights? Okay. That's me. That's what I have. And in the ensuing years, it's really funny, but I collected a couple of others along the way. Once you start making a collection, some people collect stamps, coins. Okay, so I was collecting phobias along the way. I mean, I didn't have a full set by any means, but but there was a couple, after the fear of heights came some other ones, and then there came a point, it was really very interesting. There came a point in between collecting my first fear, the fear of heights, and finally deciding that I had enough of being afraid. And in between those two events, I collected a bunch of others. I collected a bunch of others in between. But it was years between collecting the first one, collecting the first phobia, the fear of heights, and my decision to get rid of all of them. And I went to work eliminating them from my consciousness. I went to work to eliminate the ones that I had collected. It was like my soul couldn't take it anymore. My soul couldn't take being trapped inside of this small life that I created. My soul couldn't take being put in this little self-imposed box that I had created for myself, made out of my fears, because I was also afraid of enclosed places, so go figure. That was another one of the phobias I collected. It was cramped, and I couldn't breathe in there. And my soul was just dying to get out of this situation. So it was my soul at some point that called me to break free from this self-imposed limitation I had built, this self-imposed box that I had placed myself in. It was a belief that life had more to offer, that the experience of life was greater and grander than this phony baloney made-up restrictions that I placed on myself. I finally got to the point where I was done being cooped up inside of my fears. And that's when the work begins. But what happens is we just become fed up with life as it is. Our soul just is getting smothered, and it calls us to break free. And when the time is right, your soul will make you break out like a baby bird breaking out of an egg. I'm convinced of it. Now, someone said, and I don't know who it was, but someone said, live your life, take chances, be crazy, don't wait, because right now is the oldest you've ever been, and it is the youngest you'll ever be again. Don't wait. And if you could find out who said it, I'd love to know, but I couldn't find the author. Right now is the oldest you've ever been and the youngest you'll ever be again. So I did wake up that one day, whenever it was. I don't know. I awoke. Maybe it was gradually. But I awoke and decided that living that small life, trapped inside of my own fears, trapped inside of my own self-imposed limitations, living small, living scared, living unavailable, was no longer feeding my soul. It probably never was. My soul was probably starving all along. But it was intolerable. I realized it was killing off my soul. We are not meant to live in fear. We are not meant to live in fear. We are not meant to be limited by our own thoughts, our own self-imposed fear, false belief thoughts. We are here to break out of that shell. We are here to do the work to live the greater life of spirit as us. And accepting that fear is part of you is not true. It is a false belief. You know, we collect fears. We're good at collecting them. You know, you're only born with two, right? You're born with the fear of loud noises and falling. That's it. That's the only thing newborn babies have. We collect all the rest of them. And what we collect, we can free ourselves from. This is the whole idea of God being freedom. A quality of God is freedom. Bondage is how we can demonstrate the quality of God known as freedom. It's our choice. But when we decide we've had enough of bondage, we can embrace the quality of God known as freedom, and then that outpictures in our lives. We collect fears along the way, and then we allow them to define us. Hi, how do you do? My name's Patti. I have fear of heights, you know. I have green eyes, I'm 5'2", and I'm afraid of enclosed spaces. Hey, you know. What do they have for her, Johnny? You know, there's just that thing that it's like we incorporate it as part of who we are. It's not who we are. It's a lie. It's a false belief we're making up, and we've got real elaborate stories. You know the story. I could tell you the story about the tower and the whole thing. You know, it was like terrifying. I had a grip on that thing. I had a death grip on that tower. It was the one that they had built in Gettysburg. I don't know if anyone had ever seen it. It was on top of Big Round Top, Little Round Top. You know, it overlooked the battlefield of Gettysburg. And I thought, well, I don't know, looking back over it, whether it was the fear of heights really or whether it was just the energy of death that was around me that really, really just made it intolerable. I'm not really sure to this day what it was, but you know, there was just a little more than satisfaction when I watched they took that thing down a couple of years ago. I watched the news and they blew that sucker up and knocked it down. I was like, yes. But I was beyond the fear of heights at that time. It was just sort of a little satisfaction thing going on in me. But we do collect fears. We do. And they are not the truth of us. They're not the truth of us. Oh, I have this fear, fill in the blank, you know, like this is part of who I am. Like it's your eye color or your handedness, you know. Oh, I'm left-handed and I'm afraid of crowds. No, that's not the truth of you. Or I'm terrified of whatever, fill in the blank. Or I've always been afraid of whatever. None of these things are the truth of us. None of them. They are experiences we had. They may be negative experiences we had. And they all come from our past. These limited beliefs, these false beliefs, they all come out of past experiences. They're not even the you are today. They're something out of the deep, dark recesses of our mind. It's something we keep dragging along with us, and we make it into the present. But it's not. It's from a long dead past. And what we know is that principle is not bound by precedent. You've heard us say that over and over and over and over again. Ernest Holmes said it. Principle is not bound by precedent. Principle is not bound by precedent. Well, what the heck does that mean? What the heck does that mean? Ernest Holmes said it. Principle is not bound by precedent. So when he talks principle, he's talking about life principle. He is talking about the divine, creative principle, that energy that spirit uses to create things. That's what he talks about when he talks about principle. Principle, the thing that created everything. Every form, every manifestation, everything that has come and gone, everything in the manifest universe is an outpicturing of this divine creative principle. So now we have principle, we get it. Principle is the thing that creates. That very same principle we use to co-create our lives. Spirit as us uses that divine creative principle to create the conditions in our lives. Okay, so principle is not bound, is not tied to, is not limited by. What? Principle is not bound by precedent. It's precedent, anything that has come before it. An earlier occurrence of something similar. Principle is not bound by precedent. So the divine creative force, spirit as our lives, is not tied to or limited by anything, any occurrence, anything of similar nature that happened to us before in our lives. That's what it means. Each and every time spirit creates in our lives, it creates anew, and it is bound by nothing that you have experienced before. So the sky's the limit. You guys sing that, right? The sky's the limit. Now, doesn't that feel good? So we say principle is not bound by precedent. That's what we're saying. Creation by spirit is not limited by anything spirit previously created in our lives. So it can create anew any time. It does not matter what came before. It does not matter what I outpictured before. It does not matter how many phobias I collected. It does not matter how long I was afraid of heights. It only matters that when I change my thought, the law goes into action to create a new outpicturing. When I change my thought, the divine creative process goes to work immediately, outpicturing a new manifestation. I could be scared of something my whole life, and the minute I decide I'm done with this, I'm done living this small, limited life, and I go to work outpicturing a new truth for myself, the divine creative principle goes to work co-creating it with me. And that's where the work begins. That's where all the work begins. Because, you know, it doesn't take much energy to stay stuck. Did you ever notice that? You know, I think that's that the law of thermodynamics, or one of those things that, you know, bodies in motion tend to stay in motion, bodies at rest tend to stay at rest. It doesn't take much energy to sit in your limitations. It takes a lot more energy to get out of them. You know, when we accept those limitations, it just takes a little bit of energy. It only takes the energy necessary to prop up the false belief. Really, that's all it is. So there's just a minimal amount of energy you need to continue to prop up the false belief in your life. It takes a lot more energy in the beginning to create that new thought, to begin to outpicture that new thought. At least in the beginning. At least in the beginning. In the beginning, it feels like, oh man, we're efforting forever for little teeny tiny shifts, for little tiny appearance of change in our lives. But it's worth it. It's worth it. We get to the point where we are no longer willing to stay stuck in our own lives. You know, we feel trapped and we realize that the jailer is ourselves. I mean, that's stupid. So this is where the real work starts. When we become so frustrated, when we become so disappointed, when we become so angry at ourselves, when we become so fed up with the status quo of our own life, and then we realize we're the ones who created it, when we reach that point, yeah, it's worth doing the work. It's worth doing the work to get unstuck. Because what else do we have? Really, what else do we have? What choice do we have? I was reading Jacob Glass's blog the other day. He's got a blog that he puts on Facebook every once in a while, and he said this, and I love it. This is his quote. He said, "Don't be disappointed by the results you didn't get from the work you didn't do." Don't be disappointed by the results you didn't get from the work you didn't do. You know, we know what the right thing to do is. We have seen the results of the work, right? We've done the work. We've had the outpicturing. We've had the manifestation. And yet still there is that hesitancy. There's that holding back. There is that duality within us. But we have to do the work. It's got to be more than just coming and listening to a Sunday talk. It's got to be more than just thinking it's a good idea. But we know it works. We know change your thinking, change your life out pictures. But we stay stuck. And we stay stuck until we decide being stuck no longer works for us. And we get honest with ourselves. And we do the work of change, and we have to do the significant work of change. And it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable in the beginning. But I am here to tell you it is not nearly as uncomfortable as living a half-dead life. It is not nearly as uncomfortable as living a small, unfulfilled, neurotic life limited by your fears and your self-imposed limitations. The discomfort we experience doing the work is not nearly as horrific as coming to the end of your life and regret you didn't do because you were too afraid. You know, I know that there is a quote about that, and I didn't get it, but there is a quote about, you know, the things that we're going to regret are the things that were left undone, not the things we did. It is uncomfortable in the beginning, but it's worth it. It's worth it. We can look fear in the face, or whatever it's got, whatever presentation it is, and we can say, you got to really suck it up, breathe. So what? Do it anyway. So what? Do it anyway. Afraid to take yourself out to the movie all alone? You know, ticket for one? So what? Do it anyway. Afraid to go to dinner without being in a group, or afraid to, you know, to take, you know, oh, Mr. One, please, you know, and feeling like a loser? No. You afraid to go out to dinner? Do it anyway. Afraid to learn a second language, or think you can't, or had such a horrible experience in high school or college with it? Oh, God, I can't learn a language. Do it anyway. Tackle it again. You're not the you were in high school either, are you? No. Do it anyway. Do it anyway. When you leave here today, go home a different way you've never gone home before. Take a different road. Go exploring. Do it differently. Go home and drag out a cookbook. No, we don't have cookbooks anymore. Everybody goes online, right? Food.com. Go online, get a new recipe you've never tried before. Make something different you've never eaten before. Try something new. Learn something new. Take a class. Take a flower arranging class. Do something you wouldn't do. Go to the library and pick out a book, the genre of which you wouldn't pick in a million years. Oh, I don't read science fiction. I hate science fiction. Good. Get a science fiction book. See what you get out of it. Do something different. Challenge, because the challenge expands us. It stretches us. It has to. It has to. And then we have success, and we build success after success, and those fears don't look so big anymore. They don't look any big anymore. The challenge we experience in starting this, being this bigger person, trying on these scary things, the challenge that we have is not one of willpower. It's not one of forcing ourselves to do these things. It's not one of concentrating, of holding the effort. It's not that either. It is the false belief. And the false belief is this. The false belief says no one, not even ourselves, is worthy of consistent effort. Breathe. I know I stopped everything in the room right there. Breathe. The false belief that we carry around with us is that we are not worthy of consistent effort. And if we're going to change our life, we must be worthy. We must consider ourselves worthy of consistent effort. It means we have to have faith. Ernest Holmes, in this thing called You, he said this. He said, "You have been told that all things are possible to him who believes. Accepting this as a principle of your being and analyzing it to its logical conclusion, you have come to understand that faith is not a nebulous something. It is an actual idea, a definite mental attitude, a positive acceptance. Not positive from the standpoint of willpower or compelling things to happen, but making them welcome through us. Faith is the knowing without seeing first, right? Isn't that what it is? Faith is the knowing without having the proof in front of us. But knowing it works. Knowing it works, and we see it and we hear it. Every week we have the Miracle Minute, right? We have demonstrations of things that change because of our prayer. This is faith. Ernest Holmes goes on to say, faith is most certainly a mental attitude. And then he talks about the Bible quote, when a certain man came to Jesus and said, Lord, I believe, help thou mine unbelief. It's like, right? Lord, I believe, help thou mine unbelief. Isn't this the human condition? Isn't this the human condition? Oh, I have faith. Oh my God, I need help having faith. Oh, I know this stuff works. Oh God. This is the human condition. No sooner had that man yelled, I believe. The very next words out of his mouth were, help thou mine unbelief. This is the duality that we live with in the human body, isn't it? I know this stuff works. I don't know this stuff works. I know this is good for me. I just don't do it. You know, when I was much younger, I used to live an incredibly compartmentalized life. Wow, I feel like today is like sharing. If this is TMI, just let me know. It's like, oh my God, testify, sister. When I was younger, I lived a very compartmentalized life, and what I mean by that is, when I was hanging out with a bunch of guys who loved cars, I loved cars. And if I was hanging out with a bunch of jocks, I was a jock. And when I hung out with a bunch of musicians, I was never a musician. But I loved music. Do you see where I'm going with this? I was kind of like a chameleon kind, you know, and I had school friends who never, ever, ever knew my home friends, and I had home friends who never, ever knew my family, and so I lived this very compartmentalized life, and God help me, if crossover ever happened, I would lose my mind. You know, I would have a nervous breakdown if somehow my school friends met my home friends, or my school friends met my family, or whatever, because everything was compartmentalized and no two things could touch each other, you know? And so my life became a walk into integration. My life became a walk to integration. And that took work, and it took loads of years. But for me, it was a matter of authenticity. I reached a point at which I was no longer willing to not be who I was so that I could fit into a particular group, or all of the particular groups. I wanted to be me in any situation I found myself. I just wanted to be me all the time. And it took work, it took years, it took faith, it took practice, it took more faith, it took more practice. It took, you know, being knocked down and getting back up, and I still walked through it, because what I wanted more than acceptance at some point in my life was I wanted authenticity. I wanted to be me, no matter what. Oh, man, and it was difficult in the beginning. But, you know, I've heard other people say, you know, like, oh, well, we're going to sit down and talk. Well, what hat do you want me to wear? You know, should I be the boss hat, or should this be the friend hat, or should this be the minister hat? I threw out my hats. I threw out my hats because authenticity is more important to me than being in a role. In a role. I don't want to do that. So what you get is what you get. So on this walk for authenticity, whether I'm standing on the platform, or I'm sitting in my car, or we're out to lunch, having lunch, you're going to get the same Patti. Sorry if that's a disappointment. Oh, well, you know. You're not going to get a different person. You know, from friendship to family to platform, wherever I go, whoever, you know, I meet, I'm still going to be the same person. And that doesn't mean I don't change. Of course I change. You guys are changing. You're changing all the time. We're all changing. But what I'm claiming is my authenticity right here and right now at this point in my life, as evolved as I am right now. It's all, you know, I'm all I got. and that's what you get. You get the authentic me. So whether it's a phobia holding us back, whether it's a false belief of having to be a different person for a different situation, whatever it is that's going on in our minds that's holding us back from experiencing the wholeness of life, we have to look at that. Is that a false belief? Is it a fear? Is it true for me? Is it true for me, the me I am today? Because if it isn't, get rid of it. Do the work. Be bold. So what? So what? Do it anyway. Look the phobia in the face and say, Lord, I believe. Help thou my unbelief. Lord, I believe. Help thou my unbelief. That is our prayer, isn't it? That is our prayer. That is the challenge of living spirit, soul, body. That is the challenge of being in this world but not of it. It's the challenge of having one foot in reality, in physical world, and one foot in the spiritual world. That is our challenge all the time, to integrate. To integrate, to know we are spirits, we are souls craving experience. We are spirits in a body. Don't let any of it hold us back. We collect phobias. We play games. We wear masks. We try to fit in. We become chameleons. And then we come to the realization that we must let our soul express. We have to. We have to let our souls out to play. It's the truth of who we are. That is the truth of who we are. We outgrow the box we put ourselves in to begin with, and we break free from the restraints we tied ourselves up with to begin with, and we free ourselves from our own self-imposed limitations or restrictions or ought-to-be's or should-be's or have-to-be's that other people placed on us. We come to the truth of our own souls, and we allow them out to play. It's terrifying, and it's exhilarating. And that was one of the last things I did before I totally eliminated my fear of heights, as I jumped out of an airplane. And the first time, it was really, really terrifying. And I had people tell me, why would you depart a perfectly operating craft? And the second time I jumped out of it, and it was a mixture of terrifying and exhilarating. And the third time I jumped out, it was a combination of exhilarating and terrifying, but more exhilarating than terrifying. And the fourth time I jumped out, it was all exhilarating, and there was not terrifying, not in the least bit, and I laughed about it. And I loved it. And man, what a great view you have from there. So what? Do it anyway. The terrifying gives way to the exhilaration. The bondage gives way to the freedom. And the frightened, scared thing inside of you gives way to the love and the joy of being alive. And that is what Spirit wants for us. So the next time that little voice comes up inside of you, so what? Do it anyway. Thank you.